the special week that this is for you sending our Savior Jesus Christ to be a man to walk among us, and Lord, then to die and give us salvation and reconciliation with Father God. And Lord, just go out with us as we leave this place today. And as I said, let us just be lights for you. May you be glorified in all that we do. We ask these things in the name of your precious Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to our classes for quite a few years, I think, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And that's one of our long-distance students. Where do you live?
Livermore.
Livermore. All right. So, yeah. And you have a sister that lives in Idaho, doesn't she? Or
She lives in Billings, Montana.
Billings, Montana. All right. Well, the title of the message today is Riches Have Wings. Riches have wings. Does anybody disagree with that? Huh? Riches have wings. They sure do. Especially in this day and age. Riches have wings. Now, everyone wants to have enough money to live on, don't you? Have a house over your head and food on your table, and now even a car to drive yourself around. That's pretty important in this day and age, isn't it? All right. But there are some people, their riches control their lives in such a way as they won't even eat. I know several people in my life, personally in my life. I remember one couple, a brother and sister. Both of them they were multimillionaires, and they wore rags for clothes. Rags. And Marilyn, you know who I'm talking about. If you went into a restaurant and saw them, they would never sit at a table. They would sit up there at the counter so they wouldn't leave a tip. They wouldn't leave a tip no way in the world. That wasn't going to happen. And they wore rags. You would think they were street people that come right in off the street, and these were millionaires, just wearing rags. Know another man, same way, multi-millionaire, wearing rags out of dumpsters and eating food out of the dumpsters. These other people at least ate food. This guy wouldn't go buy food. He would go dumpster dive and get his food out of the dumpster. A multi-millionaire. That's what you call riches controlling your life. Because they didn't want to turn loose with enough money to buy clothes or food. And then some people, their riches, they will starve and build a great big house and make it like a mansion, and just to impress people. Just to impress people. Look what I have. We have all of those people in the Bible. Did you know that? Have all of them. Illustrations of all of this in the Bible. Another thing that people want, and society owes this to you. Now, Marilyn, are you here?
I am.
You didn't have your hearing aid on today. She didn't wear it because she said she lost it. You ought to hear some of the conversations we have. Because of that. I was out in the yard the other day, and I went out to get some cheese so I can make those biscuits for you guys. See those biscuits, the ones that made in heaven, you know. And I had laid the cheese out on a thing there in the place where we have a freezer, and it was gone, I thought. And I didn't know what happened to it, whether she put it back in the freezer or what she did with it. And I hollered at Marilyn. She was on the way up the house and said, "Marilyn, do you have the cheese?" And she said, "I have the keys." And I said, "Marilyn, do you have the cheese?" And she said, "What's wrong with you? I told you I have the keys." And she had these keys. We won't go around and around and around like that. But Anyway, Maryland made an invention about 20 years ago. It was a girdle that for pregnant women. And she patented it. Cost a lot of money to patent this thing. There's an outfit back in Pennsylvania called Mother's World. And if you go to Memorial Hospital or something, you go into the bathrooms and there, you will see this device advertised, especially in maternity wards. They stole her patent and produced it. We went down and tried to produce the thing, and they wouldn't produce it. People wouldn't back it and produce it because it's already on the market. Maryland owned the patent on it. We spent thousands of dollars for lawyers to try to get justice. We sent Mother's World letters by lawyers saying, you are infringing upon her patent. Would you like to license it and produce this legally? Jump in the creek. Forget it. The final lawyer says, well, you don't have enough money to fight them. You don't have enough money to fight them. So we didn't get justice, did we?
No, but they will get justice in the end.
Justice is a debt that all society owes its constituents, its people. That's what we long for, isn't it? Now, is that written in the Bible? Justice is a debt. What is the law of Moses about? You go back there, you see workman's comp laws, you see everything you can think of. There's even laws for animals. Animals' rights. Even animals ought to have justice. The Bible sees to that. All right? In Luke the 12th chapter, Luke the 12th chapter, we've studied this and we touched on this last week. Justice should not have to be bought. But so many times in the Bible, right is might, and so many times in history, right is might, isn't it? If you can afford justice, maybe you can get it today in America. Maybe. In England, how many of you know good, honest lawyers? Anybody know any? Have you run into very many of them? I started to ask one time. I said, do you have to be a sociopath to pass the bar? Justice has to be bought. In England, the lawyers, when they get past their bar, they have to swear allegiance to the crown. That they will never defend a client that they know is guilty of a crime. Boy, that's unusual, isn't it? That they'll never defend a client that is guilty and try to lie about it? That they owe allegiance to society? Justice is a debt society owes to its constituents. Okay? Now, riches have a lot to do with all of this, don't they? Riches have a lot to do with everything we talked about so far today. All right? I read a little piece out of this book here. This is Warren Wiersbe's commentary on the New Testament. And we're talking about riches. Okay? Riches have wings. The only difference between men and boys is what?
Size of the toys.
The size of the toys is that men buy more expensive toys. The heritage of the past must be used wisely in the present to guarantee spiritual dividends in the future. This is the title, this is the message today. All of us should want to meet people in heaven who trusted in Christ because we helped pay the bill for the gospel witness around the world. Starting at home. One thing, when you get saved, God owns your pocketbook too. You know that? That's right. When you get saved, God owns your pocketbook too. Starting at home. Thoreau wrote that a man is wealthy in proportion to the number of things he can afford to do without. In America, America is really a messed up society with messed up values. I'm going to tell you this. I had a grandfather named Amadeo Lamucci. You remember Louis, Doris. You remember Louis? My grandmother's husband, yeah. Amadeo Lamucci would not have a lawn. Did you know that? He said, you people in America are crazy. He said, in the old country, he said, every square inch of ground produces something. He said, America builds lawns to show you how rich they are because they don't have to grow anything except grass that doesn't produce anything that you have to maintain. That's affluence and wealth when you got a great big lawn, because you can waste that land to make it a show palace. And he wouldn't have a lawn. Everything he planted vegetables all over. When he got into a place that they had a lawn out here, he dug that lawn up and put tomatoes and garlic and everything else in it. He changed it. He said, this is useless. Thoreau wrote that a man is wealthy in proportion to the number of things he can do without, and he was right. I once heard the late Jacob Stam pray, Lord, the only thing we know about sacrifice is how to spell the word. I wonder if today, if some of us can even spell the word. Our Lord's second mission is to be faithful in the way you use your material wealth. Luke 16:10 through 10, which we're going to get there pretty soon, he makes it clear that you cannot divorce the spiritual from the material. And I read part of this before, but we need to look at it. The material is mammon, and the spiritual is true God. The spiritual is that which is least, and the material is that which is much. The material is false riches, and I mean false riches. Riches have wings. And spiritual is true riches. And the material is that which is another's that somebody wants. And the spiritual is that which is yours for eternity. I always tell you when I end a class what? Go out and do something eternal. All right? Go out and do something eternal. And this little statement here is, why is our Lord so concerned about the way we use money? Because money is not neutral. It is basically evil. The mammon of unrighteousness. And only God can sanctify it and use it for good. It is significant that both Paul and Peter called money filthy lucre in 1 Timothy 3:3 and 8, Titus 1:7-11, and 1 Peter 5:2. Apparently, by its very nature, money defiles and debases. Have you ever seen somebody poor and all of a sudden they got rich? And how they changed? When they were poor, maybe they were a really nice person. But when they got wealthy, they inherited a fortune, and all of a sudden they changed into an ogre. It will control their lives. Riches can debase, defile, and control your life. We cannot safely use mammon, writes Richard Foster, until we are absolutely clear that we are dealing not with just mammon, but with unrighteous mammon. Carnegie, when he was a steel magnate. You know, he sold all of his riches. He got rich. You know how he said he got rich? He said all J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and all of them. He said, you know how they got rich? By walking on people and destroying people's lives. And he got a bad conscience. And so he sold all of that, and he started the Carnegie Foundation, all the libraries and everything else, because he had destroyed people's lives getting his wealth. He asked his pastor one time, what in the world can I do to atone for what I have done to society? He said, build libraries so all those little kids can get an education for free. Always in society, libraries were considered a wealth. A country that had roads, libraries, and a good postal service was successful in history. Judge yourself by that, America. All right. Let's just think about it. Sometimes our values are really messed up. Riches have wings. Let's look at it now. First of all, in verse 13, we have somebody come to Jesus, and he asked him, "Teacher, tell my brothers to divide the family inheritance with me." And he told him, "Man, who appointed me a judge and arbitrator over you?" He said, "Forget about it. It's going to fly away anyway." Riches have wings. And then he said to them, "Beware, and be on your guard against every form of" what? Greed. In Greek, greed means to sail around and grab. Oh, like the old Pac-Man games, grabbing and eating. That's what greed means in Greek, to sail around and grab. For not even when one has abundance does his life consist of his possessions. Your possessions own you. You don't own them. They own you. How many times do people stay up all night long worried about being cheated or whatever, how they're going to lose money, whatever. And he told them a parable. The land of a very certain rich man was very productive. And he kept on reasoning, that is, he kept on staying up at night thinking to himself, saying, "What shall I do, since I have no place to store all of my crops? I've got so much stuff, everything, I've got so much. I don't have any place to put it all. I need to build storage buildings." Storage buildings. In America, what do we have on the side of the road? Lock and store. Lock and store. Because they've got so much stuff that they can't put it in their house. Lock and store. Lock and store. According to a society, is hoarding a mental illness? Well, is it? Yeah. Hoarding. Yeah. By the way, the National Rifle Association just came out with a deal. They've been talking about all the bullets and everything, that the government's buying it up, all these conspiracy things that's going on. The National Rifle Association finally wrote out a little article on it. And you know what's causing all this? They're not buying it all up. What is it? Hoarding. 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 Hoarding and reselling. Hoarding and reselling. Has nothing to do. The ammunition companies are producing all the ammunition they can put out, and when it hits Kmart or Walmart, they go out there and buy it all and sell it to the next gun show and make money on it. That's what this is what we call ungodly wealth. Ungodly wealth. And he said, "This is what I will do to tear down. I will tear down my barns, my present barns, and I will build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and all my goods, and I will say to my soul." You know what's the soul? Who owns your soul? Huh? Who owns your soul? Marilyn, what's the word for soul in Greek? The word for soul in Greek. Remember that? David. Soul. Roger. No, that's spirit. Psyche. 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 That's what it is, the psyche. What is it for soul in Hebrew? What's the word for soul in Hebrew? By the way, do you know that animals have souls? How many of you ever heard that animals don't have souls? That's what most preachers say. But you know what the Bible says? Animals have souls. They have nephesh. They are nephesh of life. Individuals' souls of life. They have souls. That's why demons can come in and seek to dwell in human or animal flesh, because they have souls. That may be something that's jar the way out of you, but that's what the Bible teaches. And the word is nephesh, by the way. Nephesh and psyche. I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Have big parties. Show off your wealth. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now who will own what you have prepared? How much are you going to take with you? Carnegie says he knew he wasn't going to take anything with him. So he made an estate that took care of it, took care of things. When I was up at the Lone Pine Film History Museum, how many of you ever watched the old westerns? You remember who Randolph Scott was? Remember who Randolph Scott was? Doris, did you ever realize how much my grandpa Charlie looked like Randolph Scott and talked like him? He hardly ever said a word, but he looked so much like Randolph Scott. When I used to see Randolph Scott after my grandpa died, that looked like my grandpa on the screen. Randolph Scott. Remember Randolph Scott's horse? You remember that beautiful, it looked like a copper. He was just the color of copper, shiny copper with flaxen mane and tail. That horse's name was Stardust. He rode that horse in many, many movies. Many, many movies. And I used to live up in Bishop about 30 years of my life. I lived up in that area. And I used to go back and forth from there to California. And out there at the Anchor Ranch, the Spainhauer, Russ Spainhauer, worked with the movies. And right there, you go see an Anchor Ranch. And in one of the movies that Spencer Tracy did, and not Spencer Tracy, but Edgar G. Robertson did, that with Anchor, he was there on the Anchor Ranch, and it showed the Anchor Ranch and that he was a tycoon. Well, he supplied all of the horses and cattle and wagons and everything for all these movies, all these Western movies. Anyway, when Randolph Scott retired, he put up a fund to take care of Stardust. And he left it on the Anchor Ranch. They left the horse there, and I would go by and see that horse standing out there in the pasture all those years until he finally died. He left a fund to trim his feet and for veterinary bills and to take care of him until he died. And I was up at Lone Pine Film History Museum, and they were showing Ride to High Country, one of the last movies that Joel McCrea and he did together. And at the end of the movie, L.Q. Jones got up there and Marriott Hartley, which were the stars, some of the stars in the movie that were still alive. And L.Q. Jones was sitting by me. He liked me, so we talked for a couple of days while I was up there. Anyway, at the end of it, Leonard Maltin, you know who Leonard Maltin is? He got up and was interviewing them, and they cried a lot because in the movie it made them really sad to see themselves young, and Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea, and now they're all gone. And Joel McCrea did the dying scene there at last and everything, and they were just crying. It took them about 5 minutes to get to where they could even talk. Well, at the end of it, they had a question and answer thing, and everybody wanted to know what happened to Randolph Scott's horse. And I used to talk to Joey Spainhauer, and I did business with them. I supplied hydraulic products and things for them for years, and we talk about the movies and talk about horses. And she told me that Randolph Scott had put in a trust for Stardust and left him there on the ranch, and they took care of him until they died, and they buried him out there with a grave and everything. Everybody wanted to know what happened to Randy Scott's horse. And I put my hand up, and boy, there's a lot of questions out there, about an hour of questions. Finally, old L.Q. Jones, he hits Leonard Maltin like that, and he points at me. And he said, he's got something to say. So he asked me, he said, I said, well, I can answer your question, what happened to Randolph Scott's horse. I said, I talked to Joy Spainhauer, and she told me that Randolph Scott had a trust fund for Stardust, and that he stayed here on the Spainhauer Ranch, and he died there, and they buried him and everything like that. And everybody, about half of them over there where I was, they started, yay, yay, whistling and going on, Then he wanted me to stand up real loud and say it one more time, and I did. And he said, how could you close something better than that, than a very rich, powerful man like Randolph Scott? But he prepared for that horse because he loved that horse. He owed a debt to that horse he felt. So this man lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. And he said to his disciples, for this reason I say to you, do not be anxious for your life, as to what you shall eat, nor for your body as to what you shall put on. For life is more than food, and body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, and they have no storeroom nor barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more value are you than birds? Now some of this some of this dissertation we can apply to ourselves today, and some of it was to those people back there. Don't get confused, all right? And which of you, being anxious, can add a single 18 inches to his lifespan? 18 years, basically, that's what a cubit is. A cubit is 18 inches, or 18 years to his. How many of you can add 18 years to your lifespan? Anybody? Brother Mike? Can you add that? You might eat right, you might take care of yourself and try to do the best, and some truck will run over you. How many of you remember the bullfighter by the name of Joaquin Sanchez? How many of you remember him? Nobody's old enough to remember. Do you know I was going to be a rodeo clown one time? And I patented, well, I was going to be like Joaquin Sanchez and Slim Pickens. How many of you remember Slim Pickens, the actor? All right, Slim Pickens and Joaquin Sanchez and Ray Parker. Ray Parker lives out there just on the other side of Fairfax. He's got a little place out there. I guess he's still alive. He was a clown that did flips over the Barma Bulls' heads. They'd charge him and he'd do a flip in the air. They paid him $50 for every flip he did. That's dangerous work, people. Joaquin Sanchez fought those bulls, and he was the one that used to carry the little donkeys out in a suitcase and put them and turn them loose out in the deal. Remember that? He was the one that used to go out here in Bakersfield. He went all over the place out there at the fairground. He'd carry a satchel out there with him, and he'd open up the satchel and out jumped this little burro, a little miniature burro, and run around, miniature mule, what it was. And he'd do little tricks and stuff in the show out there and everything. Well, you know what happened to him? A bull didn't go over him and kill him. He walked across the street in Tehachapi, and a car ran over him. And a man was a super athlete. Don't bet on anything. Dr. John over there, you take care of people and try to make them live longer, don't you, and healthier lives. He does that. That's your job, isn't it? And you're successful at it. But how can you add 18 years to your life when you don't even know whether you're going to be alive tomorrow? Tuesday, I thought I was a dead man. I thought I was going to heaven. That was it. Tuesday was rough. And if you cannot do even a very little thing, why are you so anxious about matters? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil or spin. But I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory did not clothe himself like one lily. Now, we've got great artists and things today, but you know what? A lily is just hard to reproduce. They have artificial flowers and things, but they just won't quite meet what God made. But if God raised the grass in the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, they used it for kindling, you know. That's what they used to harvest grass for. If it wasn't edible for the horses and stuff, they'd use it for kindling. How much more will He clothe you, O men of little faith? Do not seek what you shall not eat, what you shall drink, and not keep worrying. For all these things the nations of the world eagerly seek. But your Father knows that you need these things also. How many wars have been fought over sugar or salt or garlic in history? Things. Or how about monosodium glutamate? Huh? Do you know how important that was in Greek society? They had ships, that stuff was worth more than its weight in gold. And you thought it was a modern thing? It's very addictive. The Chinese restaurants and stuff, a lot of them have a lot of monosodium glutamate in it. A friend of mine had a series of restaurants, and he used to load it up. People would come there, and it is addictive. It's like a drug. Riches. Tasty things. I made those biscuits made in heaven for you guys this morning. they still had angel fuzz on them, you know.
Oh, okay.
I hope you liked them. But seek for His kingdom, and all these things shall be added to you. Seek for His kingdom. Think about God. Think about God. Do not be afraid, little flock. Your Father has chosen gladly to give you the kingdom. Who's He talking to? Well, first of all, it's Jesus talking, isn't it? Who's speaking? Jesus. Who's he talking to? Who's he talking to? His church. The church. Who did he give the keys of the kingdom to? The church. He didn't give it to Peter, by the way. He gave it to the church. All right? He has chosen to give you, gladly give you, the keys of the kingdom. The church is the most powerful entity in the world today. Not the President of the United States, not the President of Russia, not the President of China or Prime Minister of China or whatever else, India or whatever. They're not the most powerful people in the world. It's God and God's churches. In eternity, there won't be any Taj Mahal. Did you know that? Kind of poof, thrown up. Why was the Taj Mahal built, and who built it?
For a woman.
Huh?
For a woman.
Yeah, Taj Mahal. That was her name, if I remember right.
Mausoleum, wasn't it?
It was a mausoleum. It was a crypt. The most powerful, richest man in the world had this wife that he loved, Taj Mahal. And she died with her 16th child or something. She was having childbirth, I think her 16th child, if I remember right. And he was so distraught that he built this, one of the wonders of the world, in her memory. Because he loved her. She's gone. But that was done in her memory. One of these days, that's going to be gone because the whole world's going to be destroyed, you know. What will be left? If she knew the Lord, she'll be in heaven. If she didn't, she'll be in the flames. Same thing with him. What you do right now is what's very, very important. Sell your possessions. I'm not telling you know who just died this last week or so? You know who died? Very important man in the world. Who died?
Ray Price.
Well, Ray Price died. Yeah, I knew Ray Price. My mother knew Ray Price. Mandela died. Who was a real important person that died in religious circles this last week?
Camping.
Harold Camping died, 92 years old. You know what he was famous for? Predicting the end of the world, the coming of Christ. So many times he did it. He did it, remember, over and over and over again. You know, and he told all of his constituents, sell everything you have and put everything into the gospel because you're going up. The end of the world's coming. And he did that about 3 times altogether. The Jehovah's Witnesses, in 1975, they had all of their people sell all of their possessions and put everything into kingdom halls. That's when they built that great big kingdom hall out there on Brundage Lane. And that was a super kingdom hall. Remember that? Probably don't, but they did. You remember that, Brother X? The end of the world is coming. Didn't happen.
What denomination was Harold Camping?
Harold Camping was Harold Camping.
No denomination.
He was him.
Didn't start anything.
He was a hyper-Calvinist. He was a super-lapsarian with a little problem because he did evangelism. But anyway, and how many of you enjoyed those classes? We did it on Calvinism on Sunday night. We had classes that we did 99 and 100 minutes long. Over and over. They just kept doing that. Roger, you were here. They didn't want to quit, did they? Studying that. Difference between Arminianism and Calvinism. We studied that in depth. The best classes I ever did on that, by the way. I went deeper into it than I ever had before. Just decided to do that for a legacy. You know, something eternal. Do not be afraid, for little flock, your Father has chosen you, glad to give you the kingdom. Sell all your possessions. Who's he talking to? Who's speaking? Jesus. Who's he speaking to? The church at that time, right then. Right then. These are the ones right then. Why? Why did they need to sell all their possessions? Why did that church at that time, why did Peter need to sell all his possessions? Why did Matthew need to sell all his possessions? Why did James need to sell all his possessions? Why did they need to do that? Why? It's prophecy. Why did they need to do it? And Nadine? They were going to all be run out of that land. That land, they couldn't own anything in that land because they're going to be chased out. The flock was going to be spread. Matthew 28 doesn't say, go ye there into all the way. Remember how we've always, that's the Great Commission? Go ye therefore. You heard that? But that's not what it says in Greek. It says after you've been kicked out, after you've been spread, after you've been scattered, make disciples. They were going to be scattered. All their property and possessions would be confiscated. You know, AD 70 was coming, people. And the church was scattered. And it had to hide underground later on. It was persecuted heavily. Sell all your possessions. Give it to charity. Remember what happened in the book of Acts with Ananias and Sapphira? They were church members, probably saved people, but they sure were ungodly buzzards because they lied to God. That ought to put fear of God in you. God killed them. Give to charity and make yourselves purses which do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near, nor moth destroys. It is very, very dangerous to go out shopping right now in this time of the year. And this is Christmas season, isn't it? But what's going on? Robberies, purse snatching. They're stealing. When you go to church, they liable to break in your house and take everything out from under the Christmas tree and your television and computer and everything else you got and try to steal all the information off of it. Yeah. We got people breaking into your... How many of you have people try to get into your computer and your bank accounts? Identity theft.
1/7 of the Americans or somebody lost all their ID and Target. You know,
Yeah.
through
Target. 1/7 of the people in America just did that. Thievery. Thieves are all over. Not all the thieves are in prison. Go walk the streets of Aldale for just a little while. Those people are on the loose.
That's Oilville.
Go over in East Bakersfield too, wherever you go. Come out there in my neighborhood. Where neither thief nor moth destroy. Moths, you can have the most expensive clothes in the world, but a moth can get in there and eat it up and it's worthless. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Wherever your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also. How would you like to lay up things for heaven? How many of you worked real hard this last week to get something or to do something? I worked myself half to death. You know, I had my foot operated on. The electricity went out. That lantern fell and hit me right on the foot and busted my stitches loose. Everything I did this last week won't make a hill of beans different 6 months from now. It won't. It was wasted time, except what I did here. What I did here is something that's important. Last Wednesday night, I didn't feel like it, but I came to church and I taught my class. Sunday morning, Sunday night, I taught my class. See, that's eternal stuff. When you witness to somebody, when you go on your job, when you witness somebody, the time you spend here in church is not wasted time. Whatever else you do with your life for mammon is wasted. That's wasted time. What is going to happen? How many of you have seen great palaces built? Up there in Fish Lake Valley, I used to be the assistant horseman for E.L. Cord. That was one of the most richest men in the world. He was the one that built the Cord, the Duesenberg automobile. He's the one that invented the automatic transmission that you have in your cars. He invented many, many things. Sewing machines, motorcycles, airplanes, engines, all kinds of stuff he invented. I worked for him. And he lived in a palace up there. I mean, it was a palace. The presidents had come, senators had come there. He had 3 or 4 houses out there that were just set aside just for that purpose. And a very rich man, bought 3 ranches up there. And he took that palace that Cord had, that was so beautiful, the floor so beautiful, and he went and hired a bunch of wetbacks to work on his ranch. These are illegal aliens, you know. Right in there, and they camped in the palace, all over the floor. They tore the country up. He went out there. There was a beautiful ranch there, a beautiful ranch. And right at the edge of the ranch was a lake. And he didn't like the people coming and swimming in his lake because it was on his property. He put barbed wire fences all around it. And Constantine wire. And they were still coming in there and cutting the wire. So he went out there and he took loads of drilling mud, Isaac. Loads of drilling mud and dumped into that lake. And cement until it finally, you can buy cement, all you have to do is pour it in the ground, pour cement on it. That's what you call post cement. He took that and put it in that lake until it dried the spring up in the bottom. It was 70 degrees year-round, and that's where the ducks and the bighorn sheep and the antelope and the deer and the elk and the wild horses all came and drank. And you would see them out there in the mud, struggling, and the geese and the ducks, and he destroyed it all. He wanted it. He wanted to control it. To control it. Control it. My buddy was his foreman, horse foreman, when he came on there. Riches. How riches will control you. How riches control you. He wouldn't hire the people up there that lived there. He brought other people in. The foreman on the ranch was my friend Robbie. Robbie stayed for 6 months when he bought that ranch, feeding those cows out of his own pocket, going borrowing money and feeding the cows so they wouldn't starve to death, because they would take them up into the high country and put them on winter or summer grass up there. And he, when he came on, he told Robbie, "You got 24 hours to get off my property." "Why, you've been here for 6 months." He said, "I've been taking care of your cows so they wouldn't starve to death." He sold all the cows off, and those are the cows that knew how to follow the trails up into the White Mountains. And he brought in a bunch of fancy French cattle that were worthless. Worthless. Mrs. Cord called me and she asked me, she said, "Jim, did you go out there on the ranch? Would you go out there and look?" I said, "I can't go out there anymore." She said, "Some of my Arabian horses are still there. Are they any left, or did they get rid of them?" I said, "I think he's got rid of all of them." Riches have wings. Riches have wings. Riches have wings. The people that lived in the valley that had been working there were starving to death. He brought in the illegal workers to work for him because he didn't pay them much. He treated them terrible. Terrible. Well, he's gone now. He's met his reward. How much did he take with him? His house is for sale up there. All the property's for sale. How much did you take with him? Be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps alight, and be like men who are waiting for their masters, and when he returns from the wedding feast, so that they may immediately open the door to him when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves. Look at the word slaves there. Here we had something in Sunday school class here a while back, and people got real upset because the word slaves in the Bible means what? That's servant. Are we servants? Are we slaves? How many of you like being a slave? Anybody like being a slave? How many of you work for less than what you should be paid? Huh? How many? How many? Because somebody is controlling the wealth. They got really upset, and people called me from Sunday school class, "Oh, what does the word slave mean in the Bible?" I said, "It means slave. It means bought and paid for slave." But how many are we bought and paid for? Does your job own you? Or do you own your job? Roger, you worked in people for all time. This happens a lot, doesn't it? All over. Blessed are those slaves whom the master shall find alert when he comes truly. And I say to you that he will gird himself to serve and have them recline at the table and will come up and wait on them. The slaves. Look at what it says. I say to you that he will gird. Who will? Who's gonna gird himself and wait on you? Huh? You may be a slave in this world, but who's going to gird himself and wait on you? Jesus. How many of you like to have Jesus wash your feet? What did he do with his little church there at the Last Supper? What was the first thing he did? He took their shoes off and washed their feet. Jesus did. You want to be a good servant? Wash people's feet. Wash their feet. Be their servant. Blessed are those slaves whom the master shall find on the alert when he comes, and truly I say to you that he will gird himself and serve and have them reclined at the table, and will come up and wait on them. When you take the Lord's Supper, when Jesus took the Lord's Supper, what did he say to his little church? I will not do this again with you until when? Till I come into my kingdom. From now on, you do this in remembrance of me. All the Jews always used to say one thing. When they had their, what we call, the Seder, Hasador, when they'd have that supper, when they would talk about the Exodus and all of that, when they go through all this stuff, they say, next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem. Jesus didn't say, next year I'll meet you in Jerusalem. I won't meet you again until when? When is it? Till I come in my kingdom. Till I come into my kingdom. That's what I'll do. And what's he going to do in his kingdom? What did Jesus do? What did he go away to do for us? He went to prepare us a palace. To prepare us a palace. So we can live with him in that palace. How many of you want to live in a palace? The palace in Fish Lake Valley up there was turned into a dump. It was just thrashed. But we're going to live in a palace. The streets are going to be made with what? What's the paving material in heaven? Gold. Walking on gold. Right now we try to wear it on our fingers and in our ears. But it's going to be paving material. It's going to be dirt up there. That's real value. Whether he comes in the second watch or even the third and finds them so blessed are those slaves. And be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known what hour the thief was coming, he would not allow his house to be broken into. How many of you people have had your houses broken into? All right, put your hands up. That you've been violated when that happens, don't you?
Absolutely.
You start.
It takes you a long time to get over it.
Yeah.
It takes you a long time to ever go in your house without being scared.
That's right. It's a hard thing. You've been violated. What you have has been violated. It's like you've been ripped up and shot at or whatever. You want to prepare for that. Put security doors on, alarm system and all that. What's that?
Right. I said I did. I got an alarm system.
Got an alarm system. You try to keep that from happening. But how can you keep from losing your wealth today? What's the most important wealth that you can have? That which eternal wealth. Go out and do something eternal. They can't ever touch that. You know, there is no thief that can steal that. There's nobody can break into your house. Nobody can. You too be ready, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour that you do not expect. And Peter said, Lord, are you addressing this parable to us or to somebody else? They were all confused. Who are you talking about? And the Lord said, who then is the faithful and the sensible steward, whom his master will put in charge of his servants and give them their rations at proper time? Blessed is the slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Some of these things were to these people right there, and some of it is to you today, okay? Truly I say to you, that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if the slave says to his heart, my master, it will be long time in his coming, and begins to beat the slaves, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of the slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour when he does not know, and he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with unbelievers. You young people there, you're making a good investment today. Do you know that? This is a good investment. Coming and learning God's Word. It's a good investment. You'll carry that with you all your lives. Being born again, that's a real sound investment in it. If you marry yourself to the world, what are you going to take with you? Nothing. Nothing. All of you young people, this is a good investment. You old people, this is a good retirement. How many of you want to retire? Young man, you want to retire one of these days? Yeah? How about young lady, you want to retire? Yeah. Enough to take care of you, huh? Well, one of these days you're going to retire. You know what we do in this world. Brother David, how old were you when you retired? How old were you when you went to work real hard? Retirement is hard work. How much?
56.
56 years old when you retired. All right, and then you worked harder since then than you never did before. Well, you worked for 56 years basically, or up to you were 56 years old, and then you retired and went to work doing other things. Same thing with everybody. Now, how long is your eternal life? Is there any end to that retirement? Huh? How long is that? Just think about that. Verse number 47. And the slave who knew his master's will and did it not get ready, or act in accord with his will, shall receive many lashes. A servant is going to receive lashes? Can you get lashes today? I mean, is the Lord going to whip you? Brother Mike, do you think the Lord will ever whip you? Absolutely. If you do the wrong thing, He does. Let's see what it says. But the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive a few flogs. This is where pastors and teachers get more whippings than you guys do, because we're held more accountable than you are. So if you're a teacher or in some place of authority, you have got more hanging over your head than the average person. The one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a flogging will receive a few floggings, a few stripes. And for everyone who has been given much shall be much required, and to him they entrusted much, of him they will be required much. I was talking to a guy who was working for me here a while back, a friend of mine. And he's always telling stories. More stories than I do, almost. Anyway, he said he lived in Texas. His father was a German fisherman, and his mother was a Hispanic little Mexican girl. And anyway, his father taught him some real hard rules in life. When he got up about 6 or 7 years old, he wanted to go out and help his brothers. They had a big place, and he would go out, and he wanted to go out and help mow the lawn and take care of the garden area and the pepper plants and the garden and all this kind of stuff and get the weeds out and stuff, and he wanted to go to do that. So he got out there and he started doing all this work. And he really got real good at it, and finally he woke up one day and he realized that he was the only one doing it. The other kids were doing something else. And he wanted to help. Now he decides he doesn't want to do very well, so he starts letting the weeds get in the grass or in the flower beds and in the vegetable garden and all this kind of stuff. And his dad goes to him. He said, "Oscar, what's going on? What's wrong?" Well, he said, "I don't like to do it anymore." He said, "If you're not going to do something right, don't do it at all." He said, "Okay, I'll just go play." He said, "Get in the house." He said, "I'll take care of you," and started unlatching his belt. He said, "Oh, Dad, I'll do it real good from now on. I'll do it real good. Real good. You don't have to worry about it anymore. I'll do it real good." The Lord has a belt too. Did you know that? He's got a belt too. He leaves you a job to do it. And how are you supposed to do it? Do it right or don't do it at all. Do it right or don't do it at all. Forget it. But if you forget it, what's going to happen? I'll take care of you. And he said, "I'll take care of you." He said one time him and his friends built a raft and they went out on the lake. And they were going to, and his dad saw them down there, and all these boys were there, built this raft, and they were paddling it out and rowing it out on this lake. And went out there and he told Oscar, he said, "Oscar, go home. I want you to go home." And his dad left, and he said he was real busy. His dad was really working a lot. You know, he's fishing, doing all kinds of stuff. And he was a fisherman, and he didn't have time, so he figured he wouldn't come back. About 2 hours later, all the other kids had gone out on the lake except for Oscar. It was Oscar's turn, and he pulled his pants up, and everything was going to walk out there and get on rap, and his dad showed up. He said, Oscar, go home. You're going to get 7 lickings. 7 lickings. I'm going to whip you. I'm going to hit you 7 times. He told me how many times he's going to hit him. He said, Dad, he said, you don't have to whip me. I know better. And he said, no. You deserve a licking. I'll tell you why. All them boys out there, you took part in building that raft. If one of them boys drowns, his daddy's going to come over there and he's going to want to beat me up. And I said, I'm going to have to stand there and let him beat me up because I deserve it. I have to let him whip me because his boy died and he drowned and he said, you boys can drown out there. And he said, I don't want to be part of that. And he said, I don't want you to be part of it because I'm your daddy. And he said, I am supposed to be in charge of your life. And while I let you go out and do something, take another boy and put him in danger, and he gets killed, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. All of you, now how many of you have children? Those children are your responsibility. You know what the first thing you're supposed to teach them? The fear of God. And teach them to love God. How do you teach them to love God? By loving God. That's how you do it. By loving God yourself. Thank you for your attention today. God bless you. I hope you learned something from God's Word.
Can I come up?
You may come up. It's
Hey,
your
we
turn.
got a little Christmas card for you before you sit down.